Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 1988 horror film Monkey Shines. Now, this is a film that I had put off seeing for many, many years because of the nightmares that this cover art caused me when I was a kid. I knew of this film because of the cover art and because of the strife it caused me, but I had not actually gotten around to seeing it until recently. And I don't know why this cover art scared me so much. It still creeps me out because it just reminds me of how much it freaked me out when I was a kid. I just saw this. It would the cover stood out to me, and I guess maybe it has to do with these fucking eyes. It's a creepy cover. It really is. I mean, this is a demonic looking monkey, and for many years I was terrified of symbol monkeys because of this cover. So, and it's kind of silly, but really, this cover caused a lot of problems for me when I was a kid. I just saw it at a rental store, and the cover art just got burned in my mind, and it was hard for me to shake. The movie, though, it isn't quite as terrifying as the cover art was for me as a kid, but it does have its genuine moments of suspense. Now, this is a film that I liked, but I didn't love it. I thought this was a solid film. I would have to say, in comparison to a lot of Romero's other works, I would say it's a bit underrated. Not in the same vein or on the same level as Martin, but it's still a pretty overlooked film when it comes to Romero's work. This is, in a lot of ways, more of a sci-fi thriller than it is a true horror film, because it has science fiction elements, and it's structured like a thriller. And there are some genuinely thrilling, suspenseful, nail-biting moments in this movie, especially at the end of the film. I just felt that there were some things that it was lacking. Excuse me. I just had lunch, so forgive me for that. I felt there were certain things that the film was lacking, especially in terms of its pacing, a little bit in terms of its storytelling and its screenplay. It felt like there was a bit too much going on. And I'm not the only one, because apparently Roger Ebert felt the same way. But he liked the film a lot less than I did. It's directed by George Romero, who once again shows why he is one of the most talented horror directors to ever get behind a camera. The way he sets up his shots is masterful in this. There are some absolutely jaw-dropping, impressive direction in this film. I really came away very impressed and very enticed and enthralled and blown away by Romero's direction in this. He did a great job working with the monkeys, which was something that was, according to him and a lot of other people who worked on the film, absolute hell to get the monkeys to do the things that he wanted them to do. He had the patience to pull this off, and a lot of other directors would not have had the patience to work with these animals the way that George did. And also, he gets the most from the performances from his actors, and he also adds his typical atmosphere and mood to the film. He's a director that when you give him the job, at least at this point in his career, he really elevates the film, and he makes it even better because of his talent as a director. There's a particular shot which I thought was really impressive. It's just a small shot in the scope of things, but just the way it was set up was brilliantly done. And it's a shot where Jason Beghe's character, Alan, is in his he's in his bed, and he can't move. And this is after he realizes that Ella is now back in the house during the film's climax. And the camera does a quick zoom out, and the way that it was done was so masterful. I thought it was really impressive. And I use that word a lot, and I've used that word a lot already, but it really does sum up Romero's direction in Monkey Shines. That's one of the things that definitely does shine in the film, is Romero's direction. Now, he also wrote the screenplay, and apparently the script that he turned in originally was super long, super in-depth, a lot more narration, a lot more stuff. He had to trim it down to make it so it could actually be filmed and actually appeal to a wider audience. And I still feel that there were some things that still should have been trimmed. This is not one of his best scripts, but it's still a solid script regardless. I felt that the stuff with the character played by Stephen Root, Dean Burbage, who is the boss for the character Jeffrey, played by John Pankow, I thought that whole subplot could have been cut out of the film entirely. It really slowed the film down. I didn't like the character. I didn't like where they were going with it. It didn't really... Stephen Root's performance was okay, but it didn't really add that much to the film to me. I also felt that the script really would have benefited from having a clearer, more concise, more developed psychic link between Ella and Alan. It just felt like it kind of just showed up eventually. He just all of a sudden has this link with Ella, and he's through her and through the psychic link with her, he's now letting go of his inner anger towards certain things and inner resentment. And it just came across as if he was just going through a mental breakdown to me, and not really the result of some psychic link between the two. I felt that could have been a lot clearer than it was, at least for me personally. Maybe I missed something, but maybe if I watch it again, maybe I'll go see a more subtle connection. But it just wasn't out in the open as much as I personally felt it should have been. I also felt that a lot of the supporting cast members, other than Kate McNeil, who is sweet and charming and a wonderful lady, and she really did make the film so much better with her presence and with her performance, along with Jason Beghe, who plays Alan Mann, who delivers one of, if not the best performance of his career. And it's extremely impressive because it's an early role for him. Before this, he'd just done stuff on like HBO's First and 10 TV show. He had done nothing like this of the caliber of this type of performance or this type of character acting, and he absolutely nailed it. And this is something that is not easy to do for a first-time actor. Not necessarily first-time actor, but for a young up-and-coming actor who hasn't done work like this before. And he sure didn't look like he was inexperienced at all. So, I just meant characters like Joyce Van Patten, who plays his mother, Dorothy, Christine Forrest, who was also in Martin. She plays Marianne Hodges, the nurse, who's a complete antithesis of her character in Martin. She's a total bitch in this. And it just felt like there was a overabundance of characters in Alan's life that were just bitches and assholes. And it just felt like the film really lacks suspense because of that. I mean, the last 15 minutes or so, when Jason Beghe is in his wheelchair and Ella's loose and she's mad and she's out to get him and anyone else who's in the house, is really amazing. That is some really wondrous, terrific stuff. And in large part, it's because as soon as Melissa comes into the fray, and she is the one that's in danger, and Jason Beghe can't really do that much to save her, that is where the film is at its most effective when it comes to its suspense and to its thrills. Because you have a character in Melissa that you care about, who's likable. And the film lacks that with all the other sequences where Ella is hunting somebody. I like the character of Jeffrey. I love the performance by John Pankow. but the character is, in essence, still a dick because he was using his best friend, Alan, for his experiments, so he's not really the nicest guy either. I like the performance, but he's still not a guy who is the most likable character. He's more likable than Alan's mother or the nurse, but he's still in the same sort of vein as those characters. I just felt the script would have benefited immensely if it had a different approach. If his mother was just a kind, sweet, loving mother who just her only crime was loving him too much, and the nurse was actually a nice woman, a nice older lady who actually is trying to help him. That would make the sequences where Ella goes around and tries to either hunt them down or kill them because she's jealous of how they are trying to take Alan's affection away from her. That would have made it so much more effective and so much more suspenseful and so much more tragic. And because these are characters that aren't just cannon fodder anymore. These are characters that are innocents who you really don't want to see die. That would make their deaths even more powerful. That's the approach I would have given, because having these characters just be unlikable doesn't really make for good suspense. I understand Alan is having these outbursts because of this link with Ella, but it still feels a little bit forced, and those outbursts would also be even more effective if they were to characters who really had done nothing wrong to him, who really hadn't done anything wrong. They were supportive and kind to him, and that would make it even more of a shocking moment than what you see in the film. I also felt he should have cut out the whole thing where Jason Beghe all of a sudden gets more animalistic to the point where he has sharp canines. That was just ridiculous and silly, in my opinion. So I really feel that should have been cut out of the film entirely. I know this is based on a book by Michael Stewart of the same name called Monkey Shines. I don't know if that was in the book or not, but even if it was, it should have been cut out of the film. That's just silly. What might work on the page doesn't really work on film, and that is one prime example of that. I already talked about the cast for the most part, who all do their jobs really well. I mean, you even have Stanley Tucci, who has a young role, an early role. Well, he is younger here. An early role as a doctor who is a total scumbag. And then you have the clinical cunt, Janine Turner, who plays Linda Aikman, who was Alan's former girlfriend. You also have Patricia Tallman as a party guest, which was really nice to see her, because she would go on to be in the Night of the Living Dead remake and do a really great job in that. And for those of you who might be like, oh, you said the C word. I'm quoting the film, okay? I'm quoting a line from the film said by Jeffrey, played by John Pankow, okay? I'm not, that's not something I came up with. That's not something off the top of my head. It's not coming from me. It's coming from the film. It's a perfect, I love the line. I thought it was a great insult for this character. And, so I wanted to mention it because she really is. She's a clinical cunt. But this was, in a lot of ways, Romero's first big studio film. But it's only because Orion picked up the film to distribute it. This is actually, in essence, still an independent production because Charles Evans was the man behind the film and getting the money and raising it and getting Romero involved with the film. Orion, though, they're also responsible for why the film's ending is kind of clunky and why the film had some changes, and they're responsible for the artwork and the promotional campaign, which apparently Romero isn't a fan of, and I disagree with. I think this is a very simple but very striking image. I think it's actually a great poster. And I can't really blame Orion for the fact that the film didn't do well. Well, I mean, they did have an advertising campaign, which the poster was fine, but the subtitle, I mean, the tagline really wasn't that great. I mean, they're talking about how Alan, because he's in a wheelchair now, he's in a prison. And that pissed off a lot of handicapped people, and they protested the film, and that really gave the film a really bad look before it even came out in theaters for most audiences. So yeah, the film didn't do well. It cost $7 million and it made $5.3 million. I personally feel that it should have done better, but because of the controversy, I'm not surprised it bombed. The film is much more than just a collection of great work by Romero and by the cast, though. It's got some really impressive, underrated practical effects work by Greg Nicotero, and Tom Savini also helped a little bit. And by underrated, it's because there's a lot of shots in the film where Ella is like holding a razor blade or doing certain things. Well, they couldn't really have the monkey really do that stuff, so they had fake monkey hands that were used to do those particular effects, do those particular things. These monkey hands were like animatronic, and they even had doubles of Ella who were fully animatronic, which was a big deal for back then because that's the kind of thing you didn't see very often. And this was new territory for Savini and Nicotero because this was monkeys that were based on based on reality. They had to make these mechanical monkeys look as realistic as possible, look as close to real Capuchin monkeys as it possibly could. And they did a really good job doing that. And also, it is, and impressive keeps coming to mind because it really is a great way to describe a lot of the stuff you see in this film. Another way is it's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable to see the monkey Boo do all of the things that it does. It's that alone really makes the film special to me, is the stuff with this monkey who is... And what's crazy is that this monkey was actually not the trained monkey. This was a monkey who was a friend of somebody, a pet of somebody who was working on the film. And she was really good friends and very close with this monkey. And it was a Capuchin monkey. So they eventually, because the other monkey that was supposed to do all this stuff was just sitting around scratching its ass and not really doing anything, they decided to see if Boo could do these things, like set up, put the card in the telephone to make a phone call and do some of these other stunts. And Boo picked up really quickly and did all this stuff. So most of the scenes in the film where you have a monkey doing stuff like cleaning the house or running around and going into the fridge and grabbing a drink and doing all these other things, it's the monkey that they had not planned on using in the film who is doing all of this. So that makes it equally just as mesmerizing, because it's this monkey that wasn't really meant to do all this stuff and is just all of a sudden just doing all these just phenomenal, amazing, miraculous things that you just cannot believe that this is a monkey that's doing all of this. And another thing that I definitely want to point out about the film is the stupendous, outstanding score by David Shire. This is a type of horror score you don't hear a lot nowadays. This score was, you could say it's schmaltzy, but I like it. I think it has a lot of heart to it, and that really added to the film and made the characters of Alan and Melissa all the more powerful and memorable and effective. And it's a score that reminded me a lot of the kind of music you would hear from other type of composers like Jerry Goldsmith or things like that. It wasn't your typical horror score, and that added to the film. That's another thing that makes the film unique, and one of the many things about it that I really liked. I loved this score by David Shire. I think it's incredibly underrated. It features some solid cinematography by James A. Cottner, and it's wonderfully edited by Pasquale Buba. He did an excellent job editing this movie. There was a lot going on, and he made it look easy. And that's not an easy thing to do, considering how you had all these different monkeys and all these different things and all this different stuff, and you had to make it work. I mean, you had to edit things in a way where you couldn't really tell when they were using a fake monkey or when they were using fake monkey hands or when they were using a real monkey. So that's not an easy task. So he pulled it off brilliantly. And the film is definitely a showcase for Jason Beghe. And it's, or Beghe, or I don't know exactly how to pronounce his last name. He deserves so much better than he got after this film. This film didn't do that well, and so his career was kind of in a little bit of limbo. He did a few films here and there. He then made the unfortunate decision to become a Scientologist, and it completely destroyed him mentally and physically. Thankfully, he did get away from that, and you can hear more about that in a documentary called Going Clear, where he was interviewed extensively in that documentary. And I'm really glad that he's doing better, because he definitely deserves that. Because this is a guy who, a perfect way to describe him is charming. He's a charming guy, a charming actor, a great blue-collar guy, the type of actor you don't see in a lot of films nowadays. And he was the perfect guy for this role. And no matter how many times I see this film, and I've only seen this is the most recent time. I mean, I just saw it for the first time recently. I mean, and even if and I will see this again down the road, sure. I mean, because it's a rather enjoyable movie for the most part, despite the issues I have with it. But the opening sequence when he gets hit by a van, that will always stick with me, because I have a personal connection with that. I was hit by a car. I flew in the air. I flew 15 feet in the air and landed face first on the asphalt. I was lucky that I did not end up in the same situation that Alan did, a paraplegic. So that's a sequence that really stays with me. The climax is really solid. The stuff with the monkey is good. There's all these other things about the film that are very effective and very solid. But that sequence is one, it was just so well shot. It really captured the suddenness of it really well. The way Romero shot it was also very cinematic. So that also really added to its impact. It's a shot that it's just, words can't express how it made me feel, because it just really brought back a lot of those memories that I had, that I was lucky that I had in the first place. When you fly 15 feet in the air and you land face first on the asphalt, when you got hit by a car going 25, 30 miles an hour, you really aren't supposed to be remembering that. But I did. I remember everything. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I would say it's a good thing, because that means I didn't get a concussion. But in some ways it's kind of a bad thing, because it's a memory that I will always have. But it's also a memory that also always put things in perspective and always make me appreciate every minute, every second of my life after that particular moment. And it also makes sequences like the scene in Monkey Shines when Alan gets hit by the car even more effective, because I actually have a personal connection with that type of event. And I like the fact that the film has a happy ending. I know Romero himself isn't a fan of that. He liked his original ending, which is on this Blu-ray as a special feature. But I respectfully disagree with Romero, because I hated that. I thought that extra ending with Stephen Root's character, who I wasn't even a fan of his character to begin with. I felt it was forced. Because the whole thing was, originally he wanted to end similarly, where it's still a happy ending for Jason Beghe's character, for Alan. He gets the surgery, is able to walk again, and he goes fishing with Kate McNeil's character Melissa. But unlike the theatrical version, where the version actually ended up in theaters, where he drives off with her in the van and they drive off into the sunset and the movie ends on a high note, the original ending that Romero had intended for the film to have is, it follows up with Burbage. He's going back to the laboratory. There's all these protesters outside, and they're protesting about the animal cruelty that's going on at the lab. One protester throws a rock at his head, and he yells at them. He goes back into the lab. You find out he has multiple bottles of the serum, the brain serum that was used to make Ella smarter. And then he ends up giving this absolutely goofy, ridiculous, evil smile to the camera, and then it fades to black. That was just silly. That just really didn't fit the film at all to me. It didn't fit the tone of the film, and I'm actually glad it wasn't in the movie. But because that scene was cut because of the screening where people said they didn't like the ending, Orion felt that people didn't like the ending, period. But a lot of people said they didn't like the happy ending, which I don't understand that at all. Like, why do you not like that? Why did people not like the fact that Alan got better? That's what I don't get that at all. But anyway, Orion took that as they didn't like the ending, so they forced Romero to shoot the absolutely stupid jump scare scene where Ella the monkey jumps out of his back like she's a fucking chest burster, which was a shot that was cobbled into the film to give the audience the Carrie ending that Orion felt that the audiences wanted from the film. And I don't like that scene. I really don't. It's tacky. And because of that sequence, and because Romero had to reshoot some scenes for the ending, he was now unable to fulfill his obligation to direct Pet Sematary. And as much as I like that film, as much as I appreciate Mary Lambert's job on that film, it could have been, and it should have been, even better with Romero at the helm. And that's one unfortunate thing about this movie, is that because of Orion forcing Romero to do a stupid reshoot, Romero was not able to do Pet Sematary. But I don't really know what else to say about Monkey Shines, except it's a really solid. It's a solid film. I would say, I personally feel it's an above average movie. I would give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm not going to give it 4 because I feel it has a little bit too much pacing issues. It does have some issues with its suspense and its thrills because there's too many characters that are unlikable, that are essentially just there as cannon fodder. And there's the subplot stuff that's going on, which I'm not a fan of. The stuff with Burbage, who gives a fuck? I don't care. It's boring. And it's taking away from the strongest aspects of the plot and the strongest characters, Melissa and Alan. I also felt that the film could have done a little bit more in terms of its kills. I understand it's not the type of film it was trying to be, but it got predictable near the end. When the mother dies, I predicted that the monkey was just going to throw the hairdryer in the bathtub, and that happened, and that was honestly pretty lame and disappointing. I felt the monkey should have used the razor blade. I felt that they showed the monkey use the razor blade and cut Jeffrey a little bit with it, but didn't really do that much with the razor blade. So the film's marketing is showing a monkey with a razor blade, and the monkey doesn't really do that much with the razor blade. So I felt that was a bit disappointing. I'm okay with the death of Jeffrey because John Pankow did a brilliant job with his performance near the end before he died. So I'm all right. I'm okay with that because of John Pankow's performance. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen that. And I really did not like the jump scare, Carrie ripoff ending where the monkey jumps out of his back at the end, which isn't really how the film ends, but it's like a before the ending type deal. It really was completely out of left field and just rubbed me the wrong way. But other than those things, there's a lot of things to like about the movie. Jason Beghe's performance, Kate McNeil's performance, the direction by Romero, the score by David Shire, the overall concept of a paraplegic getting help from this monkey who is being given these shots of brain fluid to make it smarter, and the monkey creates a psychic link with its owner, the paraplegic. I thought that was really interesting and intriguing and a cool idea. I felt it could have been executed better, but overall it was still for the most part pretty satisfying. It's just when it comes to overall quality of the film, there's a few things that I didn't like enough that it knocked the film down to the point where it was just an above average film for me. But I still liked it. I still thought it was an entertaining movie for the most part, even though it was a bit too slow paced for my tastes. But it featured some solid performances, some great direction by Romero, and a good idea. And so it's a film that I do recommend. If you've heard of it and haven't got around to seeing it yet, I definitely do recommend you check it out. And I don't know what else to say about Monkey Shines. Except thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.